So we're ending polling, and just to let everybody know, you can sort of see we have several new people online. We have several people who are more than 12 years. And so one of the things that we want to start to think about is, even though you can go through this training, having these people who are here for more than 12 years, they can certainly help. One other piece that we want to sort of look at, we now have 41 members, and there is a thing called a mute button, and we're asking everybody to mute themselves if they're not talking, because sometimes, let's see, there we go, I just muted somebody who was talking. So as the program manager here, the Zoom manager, I have that freedom of muting anybody, but it's easier if you mute yourself. And we also, you know, it's up to you. You can leave your camera on if you have a problem with bandwidth. Certainly turn it off, or if you want to go do something, turn it off. But we find leaving the camera on gives it a little bit of a conference feel. And use the chat feature. As we mentioned earlier, we're asking everybody to go online and use the chat feature down at the bottom and put your name and your community. And if you haven't checked out this Kentucky Watershed Viewer, it's really a neat program that you can really zoom into where you are. Also, what we try to do is we'll have questions and comments. And instead of interrupting people on the chat, we're asking people if they could type their questions in the chat, or even better yet, type some stories. As you're listening to people, type some stories about things. I want to also call out attention to the male high school presentation that's coming up, and you're more than welcome to tell them what you think. You know, it's always, I find the average high school kid likes encouragement. So feel free to use that chat, and we'll save that and share it. This is our conference program, and my role here is really welcoming everybody to the conference. And as you notice, we've already done our recertification. Many thanks to Joanne. Then Becca Truman, our president, is going to really take off and do the official welcome. I'm just sort of the background person. And then we jump right into Birds of Beargrass Creek with Angela Page, and many, many thanks to Male Louisville Audubon Society for providing a grant, and I think that'll be fascinating. Aaron Wagoner is going to give sort of an overview, and you can read the rest. Then we have little sort of creek spotlights, and then the state of the Salt River Watershed by Becca, and then Perry Thomas with the Kentucky Division of Water. And then we end up with Dr. Tamara Sluss talking about COVID. And so unless if there's any questions or any comments about our agenda, what I'd like to do is to turn the show over to our president and your president, Miss Becca Truman. And you know, just to let everybody know, we're all volunteers, and she is too. So it's just a pleasure to know Becca. She lives, I'm a Harrods Creek guy, and she works on Curry's Fork upstream of me. And so we thank her every day for making Harrods Creek a cleaner place. Becca, with that, you're on.
Well, thanks, David. And this is definitely a group effort. So don't let I appreciate the kind words, but definitely don't let that confuse you into what's going on here. We've got a really great group of people, and it's been great to work with people so far. I know we've had an interesting year for everybody and everything, but really looking forward to 2021. So I know we've got some people still trickling in.
Hello.
So once again, just want to say welcome to everybody. This is amazing to have so many people on here tonight. So just take note of that. That's really amazing that we're all gathered here today. And as David said, my name is Becca. If I haven't met you, I hope I get to meet you soon. And I was appointed chair of the steering committee for Salt River Watershed Watch last spring. So most of you are probably familiar with Karen Schaefer. So Karen still plans to be active with Salt River Watershed Watch, but she stepped down as chair, and deservingly so. Karen did an amazing job, and if you met her, I'm sure you can attest to that even more so than I can. And so we've been working on this program for you all tonight. I know it's a little bit different, but there's still going to be a lot of elements that you would be used to if you have participated in these conferences before. So I think with that, we'll just get moving. We've got some great presentations tonight. And just reiterating again, we're glad you're here. Please use the chat to tell us who you are. If you monitor, where do you monitor? If you live near a stream, where do you live? And if you have questions, also put that in the chat and we'll get to them. So again, if nobody has any questions, we will get going with Angela Page's video from her class, The Birds of Beargrass Creek. And then David, did you have that available to show?
I can do that, but Angela is online. Do you want to say anything about this work, Angela, before we show your presentation?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm in the back of a car because our cell phone tower that actually services our phones is down. And so I have been working from a McDonald's parking lot out of the back of my Jeep for about 4 days now. But it's in sunny Florida, so it's like 74 degrees. I can't complain about that. But I just want to thank you guys for listening to our presentation. Our students put a lot of work into this, so each student was assigned a bird or two to feature that can be seen along the Salt River Watershed Watch area. And so we used several different sites to get some information about the birds, but we're creating a field guide. And hopefully that will be going to print very soon in the next few weeks. And that will be a guide that'll be available to the public. We recorded our presentation as a backup plan because it's just hard to get 16 things working all at one time. So you guys can play the video and we'll be here to answer questions afterwards if you would like.
I just wanted to say I think that Miss Page was a little bit humble. For the past years, her environmental science class has been going to Beargrass Creek weekly and has been sampling and has been doing research projects. And it's just quite fascinating to see a school so actively involved in watershed management and understanding. One of the nice pieces is she did say that this is going to be printed, but JCPS is printing it. So in addition to, so we can get many more copies. So it's actually the print shop of JCPS, and they're very interested in it. And so we hope it's well used by the community as well as by people in schools. So let's see if I can get this show going here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Angela Page, and I am the Advanced Ecology, or lovingly known as the Creek class, science teacher at Louisville Middle High School, and we are here to present our work that we have done on the birds of Beargrass. The Louisville Middle High School Advanced Ecology class of 2020-2021, through the support from Dr. David Wicks of River City Paddle Sports and a generous grant from the Louisville Audubon Society were presented with a challenge to help people gain a deeper understanding for the ecological beauty of Beargrass Creek. Our goal is to create an opportunity for people to learn about the ecology of Beargrass Creek through the identification of birds. Our main objective is to create a field guide highlighting 20 birds found along Beargrass Creek and the Ohio River that will connect its users to both the birds and to the creek. Our hope is that through this connection, we will teach people the value of the creek and lead them to finding ways to help protect it.
Our field guide will be sent to print in the next few weeks and will be distributed through the Louisville Community Boathouse, Louisville Metro Parks, the Waterfront Botanical Gardens, the Louisville Nature Center, and other groups who want to help. We used the following resources to gather information the students thought would be helpful in identifying the birds featured in the Audubon Society, Cornell, and the eBird site. The beautiful photographs were provided by 3 photographers who generously gave their work to complete the project. They are Pam Spalding, Lisa Miller, and Ron Moser.
Hi, my name is Gabby, and today I will be introducing you to the bald eagle. To spot this eagle, you would see that they have a black-brown body with a white head and tail, yellow feet, legs, beak, and pale yellow eyes. Now, to find this bird in Beargrass Creek, they have been spotted in the Louisville Waterfront Park, the Ava Bandman Park, and even Cherokee Park. Thank you.
I'm Jack, and the barn swallows are usually about 5 to 8 inches tall. They eat only insects and are found in the middle and south fork of Beargrass Creek.
My name is Sam, and I had the barred owl. The barred owl is a fairly large with brown and white spots and streaks, a yellow bill, and dark eyes. The barred owl can be found on Arthur K. Drought Park, Thurman Hitches Park, Caperton Swamp Park, and the Blackacre State Nature Preserve.
This is the belted kingfisher. You can identify this bird based off of its large head and with a shaggy crest, and the females have that trademark rusty belt on the middle. You can find this bird in the Muddy Fork or anywhere near the Ohio River.
This is the black-crowned night heron, and it has a black crown and a back with gray wings and a white underside. They can be found in Beargrass Creek as well as Seneca Park and Goose Park.
This is the Canada goose. The Canada goose has a black head and neck with a white chin strap and typically a brown body, and they are notable for their loud honk. The Canada goose is very common and can be found across the Ohio Valley, along Beargrass Creek, and throughout the city of Louisville. More specific locations include Eva Bandman Park and Cyclops Venue, Waterfront Park, Cave Hill Cemetery, Joe Creason Park, Nether Rough Bird Sanctuary, and Brown Park.
This is the cliff swallow. The cliff swallow often builds their nest underneath bridges, and they can also be found in the Louisville Waterfront Park, the Big Ford Bridge, Cherokee Park, and Ava Bandman Park.
This is the double-crested cormorant. It is dark brown with black feathers. It's about 2 feet long, and it has a orange throat pouch. It is found in the middle fork of Beargrass Creek, along with the confluence of the Ohio River at Eva Bandman Park.
This is the Downy Woodpecker. It's a small black bird with white stripes and a trademark red spot on the back of its neck. You can find this bird in all 3 forks of the Beargrass Creek and also Seneca Park, Cherokee Park, and the Waterfront Bridge.
So this is the Great Blue Heron, and it's North America's largest heron. They can be found along Beargrass Creek and the Ohio River. and more specific locations across Louisville include Arthur K. Drought Park, Cary Gilbert Cox Park, Beargrass Creek State Nature Preserve, Cayfield Cemetery, Cherokee Park, and Seneca Park.
This is the great egret. Great egrets are tall, majestic white birds that buoyantly fly across the sky. They are found in the muddy, middle, and southern forks of Beargrass Creek.
This is the green heron. Green herons are short and stocky birds that stalk and hunt their prey motionless at the water's edge. Green herons can be found in Louisville, Waterfront Park, the Big Four Bridge, and lower reaches of Beargrass Creek before the confluence. This is the mallard. Mallards are common throughout Beargrass Creek. They can be found specifically in Eva Bandman Park, River Park Marina, and Louisville Waterfront Park and the Big Four Bridge.
This is the osprey. Ospreys are typically travel in singles, not in flocks, following coastlines and lake shores. Here in Beargrass Creek, they're found in the lower part of the Ohio River, Lake Barkley, Kentucky Lake, and around Laurel County.
This is the pied-billed gripe. It is about a 15-ounce bird and around 12 to 15 inches long. Pied-billed gripe is rarely seen in flight because it likes to dive into the water to escape its predators and migrate at night. This bird is found in Beargrass Creek in the River Park Marina.
This is the red-belly woodpecker, known for its black and white patterns, but notorious for its white belly with notable red highlights. They can often be found in the Louisville Waterfront Park, Big Four Bridge, or Ashland Park.
This is the red-winged blackbird. Males are black with a red shoulder patch and have rusty feather edges in the winter, while females are streaked brown, and both have long, sharp-pointed bills. The red-winged blackbird can be found along Beargrass Creek, and more specifically, Joe Creason Park, Nuttoroth Bird Sanctuary, Eva Bandman Park, and Brown Park.
This is the ring-billed gull. It has white or gray with black tips on their wings, yellow legs, and a bill with a black band around its bill. The ring-billed gull can be found in Beargrass Creek State Nature Preserve, Caperton Swamp Park, Cary Gilbert Cox Park, and Louisville Waterfront Park and Big Four Bridge.
This is the spotted sandpiper. It is known for its white lines over its eyes and its long yellowish legs. This bird can be found near the Arthur K. Drought Park, the Big Four Bridge, and the Big Four Bridge in the Beargrass Creek area.
The wood duck is one of the most colorful and unique species of waterfowl. Males have a glossy green head cut with white stripes, a chestnut breast, and buffy sides. Females are gray-brown with white speckled breast. Aside from their unique body and color, the wood duck is a very popular species in the Ohio Valley. They have been spotted in Beargrass Creek as well as Cherokee Park, Waterfront Park, and Beckley Creek Park.
We hope you've enjoyed the presentation of 20 of the commonly found birds that you can spot along Beargrass Creek. And we leave you with this photo collage of birds in their environment. And we have a goose that has a little bit of fishing line around its bill. It's a little hard to see there, but we've got a garbage can that's floating in the Ohio, a shopping cart, and lots of pollution. And so again, our goal is to educate the public and help them through the love of birds gain a better understanding on what we can do and what they can do to help Beargrass Creek. Thank you for listening to our presentation.
Quite an amazing show, I think, Angela. And it's just amazing what one can put together when you're thinking about distance learning. So she hasn't met any of her students yet, except for the ones who were in the class last year. And so this project pulling together birds. All those birds' photographs were from the Beargrass Creek watershed. And it's just neat to see these young people become fascinated enough with birds that they can clearly identify them. It's our goal to have as many copies of this printed as possible so we can eventually have it for 8th grade science classrooms. We could have it for the community organizations. And it's just, we're looking forward to getting it printed. Our goal is Earth Day to have it printed by then. Any observations or questions or thoughts for Angela or any of her students? Feel free to use the chat, please.
And I'll just note too that I'm not sure if any of Angela's students are on right now, but she is going to show this to her class later. So if you want to make a comment, we'll definitely make sure that they see that or hear it if you want to voice it.
Just two observations.
Connection.
We can hear you, Angela.
Sorry, I lost as soon as the presentation was over. Like everything went black. So I will. So we will be doing a review. So this was put together. The photos that you see will be in the brochure, and they will be the information will be reviewed. You know, I will tell you that our students are faced with an unprecedented challenge of learning everything virtually, and you know, feel like they've done the best work that they can do under these crazy circumstances. So we appreciate you guys very much, and we'll.
Mr. Barnett, you were going to make a comment?
Just two quick observations. You might have noticed as they went through their Arthur Drought Park and the Waterfront Park were two hotbeds for birding. Waterfront Park, a lot of the area that they're identifying these birds is being used for bicycle, it's the X trails that they've got for bicycling, which is really not too compatible with the birding. Arthur Drought is a restoration project in St. Matthews, and it should give us pause to kind of think about the ecological restoration that's ongoing through a grant from the Corps of Engineers of the possibilities of creating additional wildlife habitat all along the three forks of the Beargrass Creek.
That's a perfect lead-in, Russ. You must be paid for this because our next presenter is going to be Miss Erin Wagoner with MSD, who is going to be talking about the Beargrass Creek study and the planning effort going on there to increase bird habitat. And I think that's why the Army is so interested, is that their goal is to increase bird habitat, just so we could have 40 common birds instead of 20. And with that introduction, Erin, do you want to take it over now, or Becca, any comments about Erin before she gets started?
I think we can just get into it. Again, if you have comments or questions, feel free to put those in the chat, but appreciate having Erin Wagoner from MSD here with us to talk about the Beargrass Creek project with Army Corps of Engineers, as well as some MSD updates that this group might find interesting. Erin, did you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, thank you. Becca's gonna, if you can pull up my slides, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. As you'll see, I kind of combined these slides. Laura Mattingly, our contact and project manager with the Army Corps, couldn't be here this evening, but it's just so hard to believe it's been a year ago that we met in person. That was probably the last time I saw most of you in person. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you, each of you, for the work that you do. I know that we at MSD are very grateful for Salt River Watershed Watch our teachers and our students for elevating environmental education, engagement, and all those wonderful things. So my name is Erin Wagoner. I am MSD's Environmental Partnerships Liaison in our executive office and work in intergovernmental relations to build partnerships around safe, clean waterways in our community. So previously I worked in our MSD Stormwater group, and that's where I had the chance to get to know many of you and the amazing work that you do. So I just want to give a very brief overview of some of the work that we are involved in to improve our watersheds, and this is really just a small sample of some of the highlights of our work, of our amazing staff, and some of the projects and partnerships that we have underway. So Becca, you can flip to the next slide. So before I do that, this month is the Louisville community had a milestone anniversary, and I just want to start off with the acknowledgement of the 40th anniversary this month of the sewer explosion that occurred on Friday the 13th, February 13th, 1981. And thousands of gallons of a chemical was spilled from a local manufacturing facility into the sewer system. And that caused sewer lines to explode, and manholes blew into the air in the early morning hours in Old Louisville. So this event, fortunately, there was not any loss of life, but there were injuries. There was significant damage to homes, businesses, 13 miles of sewers and roadways. And it took nearly 2 years to repair the sewers and the roadways and buildings from that event. So this ultimately, this event resulted in the passage of the city's Hazardous Materials Ordinance, and that gives MSD the authority to regulate hazardous materials. And so, you know, MSD staff monitors our sewers and our surface streams to protect water quality. And as a testament to the dedicated service of our staff, a disaster of this magnitude has not happened since. So I just want to say thank you to the MSD inspectors and operations crews who enforce this ordinance on a daily basis to ensure compliance and ensure that this type of disaster doesn't happen in the future. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the Three Forks of Beargrass Creek Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study. And this was authorized in 2019 between the Army Corps of Engineers and Louisville MSD as the local sponsor. So the Three Forks study is through the General Investigation Fund, which is a 3-year, up to $3 million ecosystem feasibility study for the 3 Beargrass Creek watersheds, Muddy, Middle, and South Fork. And Louisville was selected as one of only 6 projects to be funded in this funding cycle among a national pool of applicants. And it was the only ecosystem restoration project selected. So this was a highly competitive process. This funding mechanism has also been used to restore portions of the Everglades and the LA River, just to give you kind of an idea of the potential for the scope of this type of funding mechanism. So MSD is contributing up to $1.5 million in value to the project through a combination of funding and in-kind services, along with the Corps' services in Louisville and their other offices. And this feasibility study aims to improve the quality and the connectivity of the stream and riparian area habitat. So we started work in the summer of 2019, and that included an extensive background literature and data search. There have been many studies on different areas of Beargrass Creek, and so we have a lot to build from. The watersheds of Beargrass Creek cover 59 square miles, so this is a significant area in our community. And the vast majority of the stream beds have been channelized and have been straightened over time. So the lack of riparian buffers and wetlands adjacent to the creek in general have resulted in higher water temperatures, which then lower dissolved oxygen levels and can stress aquatic ecosystems. And we often see this in urban environments. And so about a third of all water that falls into Beargrass Creek watersheds will land on impervious surfaces, and then that again, being part of an urban watershed can result in stress on that ecosystem. So as part of that scoping process and background literature search, the team moved into stakeholder meetings and public meetings that were held in October and November of 2019. And sites were identified through the stakeholder and public meeting process. Those were screened for follow-up field assessments. And the Army Corps and MSD conducted those site assessments during during last summer. And so that to say, during COVID, we were in a good position to respond, having a local Louisville-based Army Corps office that allowed us to continue to mobilize the local staff to do that field work when there was, travel restrictions, for non-local travel. So that was incredibly important to keeping this project on track. So since then, we have moved into the evaluation of the alternatives and the ecological modeling phases of the project. And so that's where each site was then assessed for its individual characteristics based on the information collected during those site visits, and then followed by the comparison of alternatives. And so potential improvements are then weighed for each site. So restoring the riparian corridors through invasive species removal and plantings, through increasing floodplain connectivity, restoring the natural stream meanders, or installing in-stream structures, creating wetlands, and those type of things. So each type of improvements evaluated for the potential impact to the ecosystem or the ecological lift, as well as the overall cost of the project. So the Army Corps has a rigorous milestone schedule. They have to have the project approved through their leadership. And so we had a milestone meeting in April, and we also had a meeting yesterday to review the tentatively selected plan. And so this is important to receive concurrence and again move forward for hopefully congressional approval for the implementation of the design and construction phase once this feasibility phase is complete. And so that is our ultimate hope for the project. And so unless there's any questions, I'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so many of you may have heard of MSD's Waterway Protection Tunnel. The breakthrough of that tunnel or the excavation portion of that project was completed in September. And so we are, very excited. That's a significant milestone for the project. This is a 20-foot diameter tunnel that will store 55 million gallons of combined wastewater and stormwater from our combined sewer system here in Louisville. And so the tunnel will store that flow during rain events, and then it will slowly release it to be treated at our water quality treatment centers. And this reduces the frequency and the volume of sewer overflows that occur in our community, and thereby will then reduce the amount of bacteria in our streams and just overall improve stream health. So the next phase of the project will line the tunnel's entire interior with 12 inches of concrete. So next slide. Okay, so we are so pleased to now be entering the second year of our partnership with the Kentucky Division of Water for the Middle Fork Watershed Plan development. And this project is made possible through the state's 319 grant fund. Once this is approved, this will be the first watershed plan in Jefferson County. And we are so proud of all the efforts of our MS4 team, Lori Rafferty and her team, Colette Easter, Sarah Gooden, and all of our MS4 and operations staff that have worked on this project. Thanks to our partners, many of whom are here, the Salt River Watershed Watch, Kentucky Waterways Alliance, River City Paddle Sports, Louisville Metro and Metro Parks, have all made this project possible and have made it possible during a pandemic. And so, we are very pleased with all of the work that has been underway for this project. We are entering our last month of water quality sampling and are continuing to move forward with development of the plan. So we've appreciated all the input from you all in terms of developing the first few chapters of the plan that focus on data collection and looking at sources. And the next chapters of the plan will then focus on implementation or improvement measures or best management practices or BMPs. And that's what you see there. And so our MS4 team will be hosting a workshop to prioritize these components this May. And so just be on the lookout for input for that. And then the overall schedule for the plan will be submitted to the state in July of 2021. I believe they are already reviewing the first few chapters that we've completed. And then we'll be submitting for EPA approval in September of 2021. So really looking forward to that, and thank you everyone who's provided input. Okay, and just a few more updates from our incredible MS4 team. Many of you may know or may be familiar with our State of the Streams report. So this report compiles over 3 million data points that MSD collects on an annual basis, looks at the trends in that data, and analyzes that data in a format that is easy to read, hopefully, and is outlined by watershed. And so you can look at your watershed address and look at the health of your stream or your watershed at that point. And so the next iteration of that, we're hoping to come out this summer. MSD and our partners shown here have also applied for a 5-star in urban waters restoration program. We have a long history of doing environmental education at our Floyd's Fork Water Quality Treatment Center, and are hopeful to receive that grant, work on updates that are needed to the education materials at the center, to improve a rain garden at the center, and also improve some safety, like a crosswalk and other safety improvements that are needed. And then in addition, we are hoping to build on the success and the need for another watershed plan, the Mill Creek watershed plan. We were invited to submit a application for that, and we have, along with our other partners, and so we are so appreciative to be able to look at the possibility of that one. Next slide. And I'll just close with the Beargrass Creek Pocket Guide. Many of you have seen this. This is one of the materials that we have rolled out during the pandemic in partnership with Salt River Watershed Watch. And, as we move closer to spring, I know, me and my family, we will be visiting our local waterways. And so as you do, this pocket guide is available and is, focuses on the confluence of Beargrass Creek and the Ohio River, and just has some points of interest along the creek to facilitate, traveling either along the creek or on
No, I got back in it. It just closed it for some. I'm back in it now.
And so that, I believe, is my last slide.
Well, Aaron, we have a couple questions. If anybody has any other questions for Aaron, please type them in the chat. There was one question about the vehicle impoundment lot on Beargrass Creek. And are there any plans within this project to deal with that?
So in general, we are looking at the confluence area for one of the restoration sites for the Three Forks of Beargrass Creek project. We have not gotten to the property evaluation stage specifically, and we are working very closely with Louisville Metro, with Metro Parks, and so I know that that is likely to be part of that conversation.
There was another question about the State of Streams report, and where can people get copies of it when it's produced?
Yes, so you can visit LouisvilleMSD.org, and that will take you to Louisville MSD's page. I will drop the specific link to the State of the Streams report. I believe the effective version right now is our 2016 data. As you can imagine, this is a massive data set, and we can't update it, even on a yearly basis. But it is updated about every 5 years, and I will drop that in the chat.
Any other questions for Aaron? Aaron, if you could just give us an estimate of the funding possibilities of the Beargrass Creek Restoration Program. You think it's going to be a $3 million study. What's the chance that we'll really implement it?
What's the chance that it will be implemented? So the great news about this study is that it is tied to an implementation funding mechanism. As with some of the other Army Corps funding mechanisms that are, incredibly valuable in terms of planning and feasibility studies, they are not directly tied to enter into an implementation phase, and this one is. And so that's part of what we're talking about with the Army Corps' vertical team approval process, that, you know, it's imperative to have that approval process to then move forward with ultimately congressional approval of the project.
To me, it's just something that MSD deserves many kudos on, because it's quite amazing to have an implementation structure built like that. And it's the same way the Everglades is getting restored, or Chesapeake Bay, and here the Three Forks of Beargrass Creek are with that same level. So it's really quite amazing. And so I just wanted to publicly thank MSD for their leadership again in that whole process.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Erin will be online, and you're more than welcome to chat with her directly. But we want to move on now. And Becca, I think it's your turn to introduce Mr. Barnett.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Erin. I will just note that, as Erin mentioned, Salt River Watershed Watch is working closely with MSD on some projects. If you are interested in any of this, please let us know. And we'd love to get you in on things. And I believe there will be some opportunities once we're back outside to work on some projects as well. So definitely reach out if there's something you're interested in, or you just want to be updated on what's going on. We'll be happy to connect with you. So Russ, if you're ready, Russ Barnett is up next. So we're going to have a couple of creek spotlights, and Russ is going to talk about Hammond Creek. Russ is the founder of Salt River Watershed Watch, so we all owe a big thanks to Russ, and between him and David, they've really been pillars of this organization for a long time and have both helped me a lot as we've moved through the past year. So Russ, are you on right now?
I'm on. David, are you running the slides, or is Becca?
I can run it for you if you'd like.
Okay, so I'll just say next whenever I want to go to the next slide.
Sure. And Russ, if you want to, I'm bringing this up now, but if you want to add anything to let anybody know, feel free.
Are you sharing my screen?
Not yet. She's getting it up, Russ. Just jump right into it.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about Hammond Creek. Hammond Creek is a fairly small creek in Anderson County, which is about 50 miles east of Louisville, and it's about 10 miles south of Frankfort. And since 1999, I've been monitoring these three sites on the stream, but I wanted to show you, kind of give you a feel for the size of the stream. The only years that I did not monitor is 2018, when the doctors had me so drugged I don't remember most of the year, and in 2020. But other than that, I've pretty much been monitoring every single year. Next. So here's a map showing you the watershed. The numbers, 1 is right above the Lawrenceburg Municipal Treatment Plant. Number 2 is just below the municipal plant. And number 3 is at the point where it flows into the Salt River. You can see in the right side of the map, you can see a river there. That's the Kentucky River. So there is a very small, the Kentucky River's watershed is only about a half mile wide at this point. It's of that stream. So those are the monitoring sites, and as I said before, I've got about 20 years worth of data on this stream. Next. So go ahead to the next slide. So a watershed, if we know something about a watershed, we can pretty much tell you what's going on in the water before we even have to sample it. We can have a pretty good idea that essentially the watershed will mirror the water quality. So although parts of Hammond Creek drains the north side of Lawrenceburg, it's mostly, if you look to the left of that yellow line going north-south is US 127. And as you go west of 127, you see that it's mostly green. It's mostly forested and pasture. So in that area, we have some farming, but most of it is residential homes on larger acreage. Where I live is where it says Main Street, and it comes up and crosses over 127 near the top of the picture. I live pretty close to that intersection, so those two white dots that you see on the south side of the road is my farm. Next. So one thing that if we start looking at potential sources of contamination of the stream, we first will look at point sources, and that includes the Lawrenceburg Wastewater Treatment Plant. It services 20,000 people, so it's in the scheme of things, it's a fairly small one. It's currently running at about 2 million gallons per day. It has a capacity of 3.3 million gallons, so we're running about 60%. But coming out of that are a bunch of inorganics, metals, organics, and microbial contaminants, different bacteria and viruses. When we first started sampling from 1999 to about 2005, what we saw were very elevated levels, particularly right below this plant. And so it was actually a problem. And what the Salt River Watershed Watch did is we identified this as one of the streams that was of concern, reported that to the Division of Water. The Division of Water took a look at it, came out and did their own sampling to verify our sampling, and came back to the city of Lawrenceburg to ask them to upgrade and take action to upgrade their plant to eliminate some of the problems they were having. Now, at the same time, I talked to our mayor about the plant and was told no, that they didn't have a problem because they'd never been cited as having anything, any inspection cite them for anything, and that was their criteria, whether something was right or wrong. Since then, we've seen a market improvement. They did upgrade the plant in 2006, and so, but prior to that time, particularly when we did macroinvertebrate sampling, we only found one species. Next. Okay. And this is the species. We've found Uridenia, which is a leech. This leech is, most people think of a leech as sucking blood. There are a number of leeches that do that, but most of the ones in Kentucky waters are actually predators, and they will kill their prey. And they have the ability to live in very low dissolved oxygen areas. And that's because their entire body, all their surface area can absorb dissolved oxygen. So when you see these species, that usually is an indicator of low dissolved oxygen due to organic pollution. And that's exactly what was occurring in Hammond Creek. They have a segmented body. They have two mouths, one in both ends. And they are usually segmented into 32 segments. Each segment has its own brain. So unlike Shelby, Jet, and I, which we both only have one brain, a leech has 32, so almost by definition, they must be smarter than Shelby or me. So we did see, as soon as the upgrade occurred, we saw a remarkable change. We saw a lot of total increase in diversity. The total population of macroinvertebrates increased. But we also started to find, and we did this at one of our Salt River Watershed Watch training. I was training in this stream because near my house, and we started finding water pennies. And once I saw those water pennies, I knew we'd really had a success because they are very intolerant of any kind of pollution. Next. So that plant, this is its service area. So you can see for the watershed, most of the service area is outside. I think MSD has 3,000 plus miles of sewer line. Lawrenceburg has 200 miles. And it really only covers the Lawrenceburg city proper and some of the larger subdivision outside. The largest wastewater generators are Wild Turkey and Four Rose distilleries. They do have a pre-treatment program, and they're not projecting any significant growth. And so we're currently at 60% capacity on our wastewater treatment plant. When we get to 80%, they'll start planning for an expansion, but they don't project that that's going to happen in the next 15 or 20 years. Next. That really is the only point source on this stream, but we do have some significant non-point sources. Number one being livestock. We have in the county, not the watershed, but in the entire county, we have just under 16,000 cattle. Daily manure output of a cow is about 40 times that of a human. So this is the equivalent human population of 912,000, which makes little Lawrenceburg, it's their cattle, have the waste equivalent of a city bigger than Louisville. But the manures has a high nutrient content, and typically when we see that, we'll start having problems with high nutrients, high algal growth, lower DO. Cattle also have an ability to damage the stream bank integrity. And so the nutrient levels in Hammond Creek are elevated. Next. The other source, non-point source, is residential septic tanks. We have about 4,500 people that are on septic tanks. In the Hammond Creek watershed, almost the entire watershed is not really suitable for septic tanks. It's hilly. The hills and the top of the hills will be clay. The side slopes will be very thin soils, and there's almost no valley in most of the watershed. So there's no really large defined alluvial valleys in Anderson County. As a consequence of that, 80% of the septic systems are discharged into lagoons. I'm not a big fan of lagoons, but this is the only option that we have in this county. I asked about the number of straight line pipes. We do have some, but there's never been a survey, but I suspect that this might be a fairly significant source, is straight line pipes. So all of these residual septic tanks, they contribute to the nutrient loading, microbial and organic contaminants in the stream. Next. So when we go to a doctor, almost always the doctor will start with listening to your heart. They'll listen to your lungs, and use that as kind of a first indicator of the health. The equivalent of identifying some easily monitored and sampled parameters include E. coli, as well as dissolved oxygen to give us an idea of the health of the stream. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that on Hammond's Creek. This is the data from our, this data is on the Kentucky Geologic Survey website. It is for any data that you have collected as a Salt River Watershed Watch volunteer is in this database. And these are some of the graphs that are available. And so looking at my one site, which is above the POTW, you can see that this is for E. coli. The state standard is 150 colonies per 100 milliliters. And that's indicated by the red line. And you can see in almost every sample we took, we're way above that.
Russ, not to interrupt, but
yeah, I know.
Are you almost done?
Sure. Well, let's just flip on through this and go on to the next one. This is below the plant, and you can see that it's the same phenomena. We have it pretty much every sample, but it's not as high as above. So we're actually seeing some dilution of the treated water as it comes in here. 2 million gallons per day is coming in here that's been treated. Next. And so this is just looking at the above and below, and you can see above for E. coli, we actually are higher. The median is actually higher above it than below, and that gives us, it used to be just the opposite of that. We switched that around with the expansion of the plant. Next. This is at the mouth of the stream as it flows into the Salt River. You can see we have much lower levels of E. coli. So we are seeing that the biggest problem is in the upper watershed near the city of Lawrenceburg. Next. Next. So here's starting to look at oxygen, and oxygen, it's the standard is 5 parts per million. Anything below that is gives us concern. You can see in most cases we're pretty right on target, right on that lower level of everything that we've sampled over the last 7 years. But you can also see the temperature is the black line. Whenever the water's warmer, you'll see lower levels of DO and a problem. Anytime it's colder, you'll see elevated levels of dissolved oxygen. Next. This is below the plant. Here's that comparison again. And in this case, you see almost no difference between upstream and downstream on dissolved oxygen. Next. And this is at the mouth. And you can see that the dissolved oxygen, in this case, we only had a couple that were below. So we got a little more dissolved oxygen as we get to the near the mouth. Next. So here's just some conclusions. A lot of times people, just like your doctor, for him to listen to your breathing one time at one visit gives him an indication. It's not necessarily a great diagnosis. Same with stream monitoring. It's best if we have these longer periods of time so we can see these fluctuations. The watershed in our case, and this Hammond Creek is mostly forest and pastures, and that's why at the lower levels we're seeing cleaner water. The upper portion, we are seeing higher levels of inorganics, metals, and microbials. And I believe the problems that we're seeing, particularly with E. coli in the lower breaches are from livestock and septic system, but we're not projecting really any major changes. And so that's kind of the good news for this particular stream is there's not a lot of land development, and as long as that occurs, we'll continue to have a fairly good stream. I'll take any questions.
Maybe what we can do is go on to the second part of this because we are running very late, but type questions into the chat and Mr. Barnett can answer them, and if we have time afterwards, he'll stay around. I'd like to share my screen here, and what we wanted to do was to talk through sort of look at two streams that we're working with, and I changed my presentation a little bit, and so this is Harrods Creek and Floyd's Fork, and it just so happens it's the two locations of our upcoming workshops. So we'll have a workshop at Harrods Creek and Hermitage Farm on April 24th, and then one on Floyd's Fork at Blue Moon Canoe and Kayak. So I just wanted to give an overview of these two locations. Of course, Harrods Creek is quite a large watershed with many sub-watersheds. This comes from a map from the Kentucky Waterways Alliance. They're in the process of developing a watershed plan for that entire area. It's quite a big watershed. You can sort of look at the Salt River, and here's the red is the Harrods Creek watershed piece. So it's sort of northeast Salt River Basin. It's pretty big, 92 square miles, passes through 3 counties, and it's 31 miles overall in length. This is, Aaron mentioned the streams report. That's what this page comes from. And so each watershed in their streams report, they have a series of indicators that go in here that it's hard to read from here, but it's all available online. And it shows, is it progressing, is it stable, or is it getting worse? And so that's what we're sort of looking at. I also pulled several pages. This is the data map. So you heard Joanne talk earlier about all of the sites that are monitored, and you can sort of see across the Commonwealth of Kentucky where these sites are. This is the outline of it. When you zoom in a little bit closer, you can sort of see the outline of the Harrods Creek watershed, and they calculate, you can go into all the analysts like Russ just did, or you can go online and look at how it compares to the other areas in your watershed. This is 2018, and here's 2019. Notice we had a few people taking off from here. And so we're looking to populate some of these areas more. This is my site, just as Russ has been monitoring his piece. You can create the graphs, or Kentucky Waterways, Kentucky Watershed Watch has created all these little, emblems. And so this is my site, 3235. It's the first riffle on Harrods Creek. It's called Mint Spring Branch. And so it gives you the temperature. You can do these by graphs. This is just a quick shot of what it is. The pH looks good. It's right there in the middle of 8. Conductivity is low. That's sort of salt in the stream. The only problem we really have here in Harrods Creek, at least today, is this dissolved oxygen. And so it's right there at 4.6. And as you heard Russ say, 5 is where the minimum for aquatic life. This is the page that looks like when it comes out. So you get a little snapshot. It's perfect for sort of a quick glance. This is our workshop on September 24th or April 24th. This is our entire Harrods Creek watershed. And here is Hermitage Farm and Barn 8, right off of Highway 42. They're on a nice little stream called the Sinking Fork of Harrods Creek. And it's 2 miles from their barn down to the Herod's Creek proper. And then it's another 9 miles from there to the Ohio River. So it's, you know, lower watershed, but it's a, you know, it's a tributary. Right on the other side of 42, it drains directly back down into the Ohio River directly. So this is our stream monitoring workshop. Becca can post this flyer in the chat, but it's just a beautiful farm. If you haven't been to Hermitage Farm, it's just wonderful. The owner and our host, Miss Laura Lee Brown, is online right now, and maybe we'll get her to give a comment about their farm. This workshop is sponsored in part by the Glenview Garden Club. And so the Glenview Garden Club is going to have several of their members participate and monitor around in the Herod's Creek watershed. But we have 8 or 9 spots that are open for if other people want to join us. The second workshop we're having this year is really in Floyd's Fork. So as most people know, this is sort of the map of the parklands of Floyd's Fork. Here is, they divided into, this is the upper Floyd's Fork and the lower Floyd's Fork. This is our main stream going down through the center. And so here's the same outline going just like this. We have a few more monitoring spots. And so these are all individuals who monitor the stream on a pretty regular basis. This slide said of an interesting one. We did this quite a number of years ago, and we'd like to do it again. But Floyd's Fork has a series of canoe launches, and we've done the recreational monitoring, which means you go and take a bacteria sample 5 times during the month and during the paddling season. And we can report on that. It's been a couple years, but we'd like to do it again. So, you know, the Salt River Watershed Watch, in addition to this regular monitoring, we do special projects, and this was one of them. This is where our meeting is. It's on April 10th, a Saturday, at Blue Moon Canoe and Kayak. This is Taylorsville Road right here, so it's downstream of Taylorsville, 6265. We'll be right on the banks of Floyd's Fork, and we'll go on out and do our sampling. That's a quick update really for Herod's Creek and for Floyd's Fork. And I wanted to see if Miss Laura Lee Brown would like to say anything about Hermitage Farm, or Louise Gardner, who is the Garden Club sponsor. Do you have any comments, Louise or Laura Lee? Nope.
Laura Lee, I'll defer to you if you're there. Well, I'll just say quickly that we are thrilled that the Garden Club has opted to be a participant in this. Who has ever said no to David Wicks? Raise your hand. But we have, as David said, a few spots left for non-Garden Club members. And how will they let you, how can those people participate, David? How will we do that?
We will have we'll have an email that goes out to everybody, and the Kentucky Division of Water is doing the registration for it. So that's Joanne, who started us off today.
Okay, terrific. Hope to see you, some of you there.
It's just a wonderful opportunity to work with the Garden Club. One of the things that I'm not sure if most people realize, but Louisville is the center in many ways of a lot of Garden Club activities. They've been actively engaged in the Garden Club America. What is it? The National Garden Club? I'll get it. Garden Clubs of America.
Garden Club of America.
And Louisville hosted one of the major conferences this past year, and we had a great opportunity to interact with gardeners from around the United States and show off Beargrass Creek, and it just was a wonderful workshop, and many thanks to Luis. And if you haven't been out to Barn 8, the evening is a special time. They have a wonderful art show with maybe 35 3D digital cameras that uses the forest as the backdrop and Little Sinking Fork as the forefront. So you have animals crawling. It's all 3D. It's just amazing. Well worth it. Plus good food and bourbon if you like to drink bourbon. So that's my 2 shows on Harrods Creek and Floyd's Fork, and I hope people can come on out and join us.
All right. Well, thanks, David, and thanks, Russ. And I encourage people to reach out to them if you have any questions. I did promise a little bit of a break, so if people are okay with it, why don't we just take 5 minutes, stretch your legs, and come back refreshed, and we'll finish it up. And if we have to go later, we go later, and we understand if you can't stay later, but we are recording and we can send it out. So take a break, get some tea or whatever you need to do, and if you have any questions, we can chat right now as well. So 5 minutes.
Russ is normally used to talking in 55-minute segments as a professor at the university, and he only got 40 minutes. So Russ, can you finish off your 50-minute spiel? Sorry, Russ, that was a joke.
You're muted, Russ.
The best part.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or something to chat about while we're on for a couple of minutes?
What's up next, Becca?
I am up next.
Sounds great. I would say once you get your screen ready and
yeah, that's a good idea.
I want to know how Russ is surviving this retirement and how his family is surviving his retirement. No, you're on mute. You got to unmute. We have to say that at least once a meeting, right? There you go.
I just got back from Yellowstone, where the warmest day was 20, the coldest day was -15. The snow is anywhere from 12 inches to 4 feet deep. So that's how you spend your time when you're retired. But I did get to see a wolf pack, which is unusual. I've heard them, but I've never seen them before. And I did get to see a buffalo migration, where about 1,000 buffalo were traveling through the Lamar Valley.
Wow.
You were in Lamar Valley?
Yes.
Yeah, they got a large wolf pack there.
There's 11 wolf packs. This one had about a dozen wolves in it. And the thing that astonished me is when I saw some of their footprints, they're about 5 inches in diameter.
Yeah, they're monsters. They're Canadian wolves, what they are, but they're big.
Yeah, they're big.
Yeah. Never been there in the wintertime. I'm definitely going to go.
Well, retire, Ron. Retire. That's all you need to do. And
Well, next year I'm going to retire. I'm hanging up the badge and I'm going.
Well, the time to go there is the winter. I couldn't believe it when I did go to Old Faithful, and I've been to Yellowstone about 5 or 6 times, but never in the winter. And there were about 100 people there. And then as soon as the thing was over, they all took off. And for the next time it erupted, we were the only people there. There's nobody there, no park rangers. There's nobody there except my group, which is 4 people.
There's only one or two roads that are open anyway through the park in the winter.
The only road that's open for automobile traffic is Lamar Valley. Everything else is closed. So I had to go by snowcat or snowmobile.
Yellow bus.
All right. Do you think I should just get started, David?
You're on, Becca.
I'd say go ahead.
All right, I'm going to go ahead. So I'll try to not be too long-winded here, but there's some good information to share. And if you're used to these presentations, typically the State of the Salt River Watershed Watch is about talking about the data collected from the previous year and sort of what's going on with our waterways. So we did have some sampling in September, and I am going to show that, but most of this is sort of going to be an overview. I think we have a lot of new people on here, and even if you've been around for a long time, there's some good things to kind of remember and think about. So let's see. So I've got an overview here. So we're going to start with kind of a quick overview of Watershed Watch in Kentucky, as well as water quality in Kentucky, and then get into Salt River Watershed Watch information. So the structure, data and monitoring, what we have planned for 2021, our funding, and then of course, volunteer recognition. So Watershed Watch in Kentucky, this is our umbrella organization for Salt River Watershed Watch. So it's the statewide citizen monitoring effort to improve and protect water quality by raising community awareness and by supporting implementation of the goals of the Clean Water Act and other water quality initiatives. So again, this is the organization that Salt River Watershed Watch and the 6 other basin groups work together under. So this group helps to coordinate and advise Watershed Watch groups, support citizen science with tools to collect and interpret data. It's run by a board of directors, but I should make note to not think of this board as sort of another group of people kind of over there. So this board is made up of representatives from the basin. So it is kind of that interconnectedness between the basins more at that local level and then water getting together at the state level to have continuity, support, and kind of streamline things to help things move along well. And then Watershed Watch Kentucky also helps to distribute funding to the different basins, and I'm going to talk about funding a little bit later on. And Melissa Mcallister, she is the chair of the state board right now. She's done an amazing job, especially during this time, and she's built out a whole new website. I encourage everybody to write that down and check it out. And it does connect to our individual Salt River Watershed Watch page, but it has some good information to check out as well. And then the other thing I'll mention about the state organization is that there are 6 different subcommittees, and again, similar to the main board of Watershed Watch in Kentucky, the subcommittees are also made up of representatives from each basin. And I just wanted to highlight one of them that I'm on. So, and I'll also note that anybody is welcome to participate in these subcommittees or the state board, but I'm on the Citizen Action Committee. And so we have been meeting monthly for a little while now. And a couple things we're working on include gathering success stories from the basins, as well as putting together a water quality action plan. So stay tuned for those things. And then each of these individual subcommittees is also working on some great projects that are going to help support us here in the Salt River. Okay, so water quality in Kentucky, I think especially for people who aren't as familiar with Watershed Watch, it's important to kind of take a step back to talk about water quality in general. So I'm not gonna go into the Clean Water Act. That would be a whole separate presentation, and we can do that another time if you're interested. But what we're doing kind of stems in a lot of ways from the 1972 Clean Water Act. So this is the federal legislation and has to do with reducing pollutants that are entering our waterways. And the main goals here are to eliminate discharges of pollutants into the navigable waterways and achieve this by protection and propagation of fish and wildlife, as well as recreation. So you might have heard the terms swimmable, fishable waterways. Those are common terms kind of tossed around. So that stems from the Clean Water Act. We want to protect our water resources, and our water resources are defined by water quality standards. So from the federal level, with the Clean Water Act, you now have your individual state levels. And so we have the Kentucky Division of Water, and they are tasked through the Clean Water Act to regulate both point sources, and Russ kind of mentioned the point source and non-point source. So they have to regulate the point source discharges, and as well as they provide support for reduction of the non-point source discharges. And the Kentucky Division of Water, they rotate their monitoring sites all throughout the state and determine if our waterways in Kentucky are meeting water quality standards. So again, that fishable, swimmable, do our streams support aquatic wildlife? They make those determinations, and then they report that to the federal government, and those reports can the public has access to them. And I'm going to show a little bit of that information so we get a sense of where we are in Kentucky. So in terms of aquatic wildlife, we define these, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds with this, but we basically have this system to say, are our streams meeting water quality standards? And if they're not, we call them impaired. So just based on this visual and then looking at this pie chart, we can see that most of the streams that Kentucky Division of Water monitors are considered impaired, meaning they don't support aquatic wildlife. And connecting back to what you've already heard tonight, that's based on our dissolved oxygen. So Russ had again mentioned that dissolved oxygen, we want it to be above 5. So if it's not, that's a problem, and that's going to degrade the ability for wildlife to live in our streams. And then the other one of the two here is primary contact. So this is how we're describing the ability for people to swim in our waterways, recreate in our waterways, and we call that primary contact recreation. So similar graph here, and just based on this pie chart, we can see that almost 80% of our waterways are impaired. Again, these are the waterways that Kentucky Division of Water monitors. So kind of stemming from there, this is at the state level. And then just a reminder, and I'm relatively new to Kentucky, so this is pretty awesome to learn about, but Kentucky has over 90,000 miles of streams and more miles of running water than any other state except Alaska. So that's a pretty cool number. But what I'm getting at here is that the streams assessed by the Division of Water, compared to that 90,000, they're assessing less than 15% of all of our waterways in Kentucky. And so why do we need Watershed Watch? Well, again, most of our waterways are not ever assessed. And when Kentucky Division of Water assesses them, they're on a rotating schedule. So with Watershed Watch volunteers, we have this huge opportunity to fill this gap. And not only with Salt River Watershed Watch are we monitoring on a rotating schedule, but we're monitoring multiple times throughout the year. And you're also getting the same person at that site multiple times a year. So that creates a long-standing record, and samplers can become very familiar with your site. So if something changes even a little bit, you might notice it, and then that might lead to pursuing what's going on with that stream, and maybe even a project to solve an issue that you've noticed. And so the Watershed Watch data, we call this scoping data. So it's not done to the standards that Kentucky Division of Water would monitor streams, but it is really, really important data, and it can help guide Kentucky Division of Water or other watershed groups, or even Salt River Watershed Watch, into investigating an area, and again, identifying a problem. And then I'll just note here, so Watershed Watch volunteers can assist with projects. So Russ and David talked about that. Russ gave a great example, and pursue their own interests. So really just emphasizing the need for Watershed Watch and the importance of our volunteers. And then reminder that Salt River Watershed Watch has been around since 1998. It's a volunteer organization, so completely volunteer based, except for Joanne Palmer, who's the state coordinator. And then I was looking back on the records, and it looks like 85 people have completed that main introductory core monitoring training. So just a pitch here for our steering committee. So we meet monthly on the second Wednesday. We've moved our time to noon. We used to meet in the evenings, but we're at noon right now. And I just wanted to identify who our steering committee members are and let people know that we are interested in expanding our steering committee, having more input, and would love to have more people join. And you can join our steering committee, or if you just have an interest in doing something, we'd love to support you. These are just a few ideas, but fundraising, recruitment, or you could serve as a substitute as a sample runner when we have our stream monitoring those 3 times a year. And then, as I said, the statewide board could also use some more help from us here at Salt River Watershed Watch. And there's a lot of ways to get involved. There's those 6 committees. And if this seems like a stretch for you, you say, I would never do that. There's no pressure. If something you're interested in, come join us, talk to us, and have a conversation. And if that's not something you're interested in, we completely understand, but don't be shy. We definitely want to get more input from other people who are sampling, who maybe have different ideas and aren't as intertwined into the water quality world as some of us. We find that sometimes you're talking to the same people over and over again in a room, and we really want to get more input into what's going on. So in a typical year, this is sort of what things look like for us. We have our February annual conference. That's where we are right now. And then in about March and April, we do volunteer recertification and training for new samplers. And then we have a spring, summer, and a fall field chemistry and E. coli collection. And then in sometime between June and July, you do this on your own, but if you are trained, you can monitor the habitat as well as do the macroinvertebrate sampling. And then year-round, we do pilot studies, group projects, and we support partners similar to the way we're supporting MSD and their Beargrass Creek project. So we have over 70 sites that have been monitored both in 2018 and 2019. And I'm hoping that we'll have at least this many for 2021. I just wanted to give everybody a visual if you haven't seen this. In 2020, we had 10 sites monitored. So typically Karen or whoever is giving this presentation would really go in depth into the data, but I did want to show what we had, and I appreciate those of you that were able to get out and monitor and show that data. So I'm not going to go much into describing this right now, but just to give you a visual of where we were at from those 10 sites from September, we can see that most of our sites fell in that good or excellent for bacteria, and mostly good here for our other field parameters. And then thinking about digging into the data, if you've been collecting for many years or maybe even just a couple, you might want to say, well, what can I do with this? What does it mean? And there are a lot of resources for you, and those include our basin report card. So typically there would be a basin report card, probably not going to do this for 2020, but definitely for 2021. And then WWKY, they do an annual report where they take all of the data, compile it together, similar to the basin report card, but for the whole state. And we're also working on, as I mentioned, a menu of water quality practices. There's also an action policy, so linking concerns with solutions. And then this online data portal is also available, and you can go and you can check out the data that's been collected, and that's a really great way to see that and look at it further. Okay, so I know I am getting short on time, but I'll go kind of through the rest of this quickly here. if you have a success story, you've been around for a while and you did something that you're proud of, please let us know. We're trying to compile these. There was a report from 2014, but we want to know if you've done something in the past, how is it doing now? And then if you've done something since 2014, we want to get that documented and promote that. And this has kind of been already described to you all a lot already. So the different ways we monitor field chemistry, bacteria, and then habitat and biology. So I'll kind of move on here. And David already mentioned those trainings. So if you're interested in a training, becoming a sampler, please contact Joanne. We have those two events. If we get more interest than we have capacity for, then we'll likely have another training, but we just have the two for now. And for those of you who plan to monitor or interested, just to get a sense for what that schedule looks like, we have those 3 main sampling events, and then for the spring, summer, and fall, as well as biology and habitat monitoring during the summer. And then we do have sampling area coordinators, so people who have volunteered to be a point person to collect samples for an area within the Salt River Watershed Watch and then bring those to the lab. So if this is something that you say, oh, well, I can help and be a sub, please let us know. It's always great to expand our list there. And so we have this field trip. Greg, are you on? And I'm almost done, I promise. And I'm going to let Greg describe this a little bit. This is his idea to have a field trip to this site in May. And I see you're on, Greg, so I'm going to stop talking now.
My name is Greg Coons. We have a family farm, been in the family for over 100 years out in the knobs. The headwaters of our stream is Bernheim. And what I was concerned about was the silting in of the creek. And I began to think about it. We had some horrific rain events, and many of these little branches that come out from the hollows would overflow the fields. And so to that end, talking with Steve Perry, Russ Barnett, we decided to look at our branches and see how we might improve them. And what you see here is on the right-hand side, an area that we planted alongside of the branches, and we felt we really needed to do more. We put hay bales down here to slow the water down and also to keep people from driving with their ATVs and pickups next to the branches. So on May 15th at 1 o'clock, we're delighted to have a little workshop out there, but we're glad to see you. We show you what can be done with riparian buffers, both the theoretical aspects and the practical aspects. So May 15th at 1 o'clock on Crooked Creek Road. And there'll be an announcement, correct, Becca?
Yeah, and I believe we're going to try to limit the group on this one. So we'll announce it and then reach out to probably myself or Greg to let us know if you're interested. But we'll do some type of informal registration just to keep the group small.
I just wanted to give a shout out for Mr. Coons there. If you don't know Greg, he is an amazing woodland guy, very active with the Kentucky Woodland Owners Association, and just his farm is beautiful out there. Very involved in helping create Knob Creek State Forest, which is our newest state forest in our Commonwealth. And so if you have an opportunity, go check out his farm. It's a classic Kentucky farm. It's beautiful.
Great.
Thank you.
Let's see. All right. So one of the last things to mention, definitely one of the most important, is just talking a little bit about our funding. And most of our funding does come from donations, and all either comes from donations or grants. So I'm going to have, I think, Ward, if you're available to mention something here about this. And I just wanted to show here who has been our donors over the past year, and thank you so much. And I'm going to show also what our status of funding is. So mostly because of the awesome donations we had last year, and then the lack of sampling also from last year, we do have full funding for 2021 to move forward. So that's really exciting for us. And just to be transparent and show you what our balance looks like here. So typical years, we're averaging about $7,000 of spending, and we've got over 10. So that's really amazing that we are funded. And then we also expect to get some more funding this spring through the Virginia Environmental Endowment Grant. And KWA is our fiscal sponsor. Ward, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay, I've got a slide here for you. Ward sent me this link here to a donation page that they made for us, and I'll let you go ahead, Ward.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that KWA we were one of the organizations that started Watershed Watch way back almost 25 years ago, I guess about 25. And still have supported several of the Watershed Watch groups, and we have a seat on the Watershed Watch board statewide. We're really involved in the Kentucky River Watershed Watch. We have a project in the Red River, but we're fiscal sponsors for 2 of the Watershed Watches, Salt River Watershed Watch and the Green River Watershed Watch. What it means to be a fiscal sponsor is we're a 501c3, so donations to us are tax deductible. And so you can donate to Salt River Watershed Watch through us. So the donation technically, legally through IRS goes to us, but we've agreed to segregate those funds in an account, and we keep all those funds for Salt River Watershed Watch. So you've been able in the past to give to us and just make a note on your check or online, but we've set up a site which Becca gave the link to here, and I've put it in a couple of commercial messages in the chat with this link. So we've got a page that kind of says a little bit about Salt River Watershed Watch and a donate button, and when you donate through that, it'll get flagged and we'll put it in the account. So we're glad to do it. It's a great group, and I'm looking forward to more sampling in 2021.
Thanks, Ward. Yeah, and it's such a huge help to have KWA as our fiscal sponsor. It really makes a difference. So thank you. And then, all right. So just definitely recognizing our volunteers. Amazing volunteers. I pulled this from the slides from last year and double checked to see who monitored. So 2010 to 2020, and then hopefully you saw your name. If you didn't, let me know if you've been monitoring. And then as well as going all the way back to 1998, and thank you all. And that's it. And my contact is down here. Feel free to reach out to me about this. And my last slide is just if you want, I'll send this out. If you want to take a screenshot or anything like that, you can. But these are our dates for this year. And with that, we'll move on. And if you have any questions, maybe we'll save that. Unless it's a burning question, maybe put it in the chat and I can chat with you there, or we can chat another time. I know we are getting a little short on time. I apologize for that. Okay, so next we have Perry Thomas. So Perry is our contact through the Kentucky Division of Water, and she's been a huge help for Salt River Watershed Watch over the past probably about a year and a half now since you came to Kentucky. And Perry, you're great to work with, and I'll let you take it from there.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Good evening all. I recognize several of you from last year. It does seem amazing that it was a full year ago that we met at USGS. Becca has asked me to describe some of the new monitoring opportunities, and I'll do so just briefly here. I did want to mention that we got out to Taylorsville Lake for a training this summer. That's us socially distanced on the dock there. And if you're interested in joining one of the teams that's already monitoring Taylorsville Lake, you could contact Joanne Palmer and she can get you in touch with them. We've also had a workshop on Crystal Lake over the summer in 2020. And thanks to Becca for joining us for that one, as well as for the Taylorsville Lake training. And this image is by Becca. The new sampling methods that I'll be reviewing are the lake program, how we're expanding that, harmful algal blooms and nutrients. Shown here is Haley Baird from the NRCS Bardstown office. We met in December to sample Beach Creek in the Spencer County portion of the Taylorsville Lake watershed, and she's piloting one of the nutrient field kits in this picture. So why monitor lakes? Since you all know nutrients and sediments accumulate in our lakes and reservoirs, the lakes can serve as early warning indicators of problems upstream. Getting to know them well is one goal of the Volunteer Lakes Monitoring Program. As Becca mentioned, the Division of Waters monitoring staff can't visit all Kentucky's lakes every year, not even every 5 years. So it's really important to have volunteers on the ground, keeping an eye on lakes and getting to know them well. One indicator of a healthy lake is healthy vegetation along the shoreline and in shallow waters where plants serve as nursery areas for fish. You may know about the Fish and Wildlife's use of Christmas trees in Kentucky's lakes. That's to supplement native vegetation and improve habitat for fishes. So the lake monitoring program is very young. This coming summer, we hope to expand from the current 10 lakes across the state to 100. And if you wish to organize a volunteer effort for a local lake, you and your team will need to be prepared to monitor every 2 weeks between May and October. In addition to getting to know the lake well, we monitor color and transparency. Color helps us determine both sediment load and what kinds of algae may be present. This diagram that I showed last year, this review, reminds us that algal populations change over the summer. There's a natural succession that happens. And so getting to know your lake allows you to know whether the algae growing at a certain time are normal. And we can tell what kind of algae, partly by what color the lake is. We also use a Secchi disc to monitor transparency. This is a classic approach. And by monitoring every 2 weeks, we not only get to know our lakes well, but also collect data that are used to ground truth satellite imagery. So this figure shows the paths flown by satellites over Kentucky. We determine dates of sampling based on the Landsat flyover schedule. And ultimately, the Division of Water hopes to be able to predict harmful algal blooms based on the satellite imagery. Naturally then, those of you interested in volunteering for the Lake Monitoring Program may also want to monitor algal blooms. But as Louisvillians are all too well aware, harmful algal blooms are not limited to lakes. This image from the Courier Journal reminds us that we're just as likely to find HABs, the harmful algal blooms, in the Ohio River. They're also common in many of Kentucky's larger inland rivers. So that's why we're inviting both Corps monitors, those of you who monitor streams or are planning to monitor streams, and the lake monitors to participate in monitoring harmful algal blooms. Again, the Division of Water staff can't keep an eye on all of Kentucky's waterways, and we really depend upon community members to identify potentially harmful algal blooms. If you suspect one, you can direct your search engine to Kentucky DOW HAB. You'll land on this map and find out whether an algal bloom in your area has already been reported. If not, there are a couple of different ways to report it. One is this newly developed and updated app. Version 4.6 is now available for both Android and iPhones. It's been taken over by the EPA, so it's really slick at this point, and I encourage you all to download it and use it, even if you're not planning to monitor officially, perhaps to get to know this app is really an interesting exercise. If you do use it, make sure your data are uploaded to this email address on the slide, water@ky.gov. That's the central point for reporting. You can also just email that, or there's if you go to the HAB map, you'll find a phone number you can call as well. So with lake and algae monitoring tools now widely available to our communities, we can get to know our lakes and large river systems better. As we do so, we may well find that we need to figure out where excess nutrients come from in our watersheds. And that's the reasoning behind this new nutrient pilot study that rolled out last fall. In this slide, you'll see that there are gold stars and red stars. The gold stars are field study only. They're places where the nutrient field kits are being tested. And the red stars are ones where laboratory samples are also being taken, so samples for analysis in the laboratory. I'll have to admit that I was doubtful that we would be able to collect useful data with the test kits that are being distributed. But after working with volunteers at Cane Run in Henry County and Beech Creek in Spencer County, I'm more optimistic. The kits selected for the pilot by the Kentucky Water Resources Research Institute mimic laboratory tests. They're essentially micro versions of the laboratory analyses that some of us are accustomed to running. We also collect data to estimate stream discharge. So together, the nutrient results and the discharge measures can be used to estimate downstream loading and yields. So I encourage you to stay tuned for results from the pilot. And meanwhile, if you'd like to expand your monitoring to include either lakes or HABs, feel free to reach out to Joanne Palmer or me. And also, I'll just remind you that I can provide advice regarding what tools you'll need in your toolkit if you'd like to start an action team like the ones that Becca described in her presentation. So with that, I'll stop sharing and turn it back over to Becca and Dave.
Thanks, Perry. Does anyone have any questions for Perry? Okay, well, if not, we'll move on to our last presentation. And Tamara, hi Tamara.
Hey, I'm going to share my slides. Hopefully that works.
Okay, yeah, great. And Tamara is going to talk about the SARS-CoV-2 study in waterways in Louisville. And I should say Dr. Tamara Sluss is a professor at U of L and also on our steering committee. And I'll let you take it away when you're ready.
Thanks, and thanks for having my slides ready to go. I decided to delete a slide out of the sake of time, and I'm glad I'm able to share. But thank you all for sticking around. I know it's been a long evening, but you know, very informative, and we have some pretty exciting, interesting results from our study this winter, where we sampled for SARS-CoV-2 in 2 branches or 2 forks of Beargrass Creek. I did this work with one of the students in the interdisciplinary Masters of Sustainability program at the University of Louisville, Colin Hunter, and she's also an intern with Kentucky Waterways Alliance. And they supported this research along with a group of other folks. This is kind of an arm of the Co-Immunity Project, along with the Envirome Institute. The Envirome Institute has been partnering with MSD, and they've been sampling for SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater samples. We did present a webinar January 19th, along with the Envirome Institute, where they talked about the wastewater samples, and then we talked about the surface water samples. I think there is a recording available of the wastewater study. They are working on publishing those data. Now, when I gave this webinar or this slideshow before, I did have a pretty general audience. The folks on this call today are much more familiar with the terms that we would use in stream ecology and CSO systems in Jefferson County. But I did want to make it clear to people that, you know, CSOs do release untreated wastewater into streams, as well as stormwater overflows, but there's also water that runs off the surface from the watershed into the existing volume of water in the stream. So all of these, you know, inputs come together to add to the volume of the stream flow. So really our objective was to quantify the presence of SARS-CoV-2 in Beargrass Creek. We looked at the middle fork and the south forks of Beargrass Creek, adjacent to CSOs, and also adjacent to the sites that Envirome was sampling. The Envirome Institute is sampling 17 different wastewater overflow sites, manholes and whatnot around the county. We chose 2 because they were close to where they were sampling. And also we know that these areas have recreational use. So folks were likely to come into contact with SARS-CoV-2 potentially if it was present. And we predicted that there would be inputs and the presence of SARS-CoV-2 after the rainfall events, because we know that SARS-CoV-2 is shed in our feces, and we know that we have that untreated sewer after a large rainfall event or a spate. I might use that term, spate, throughout the talk. And so I wanted to look at the different watersheds of Middle Fork and the South Fork. And so you can see the outline of the watershed here. I'm gonna move my picture of people over so I can see. And just to orient folks, most of you all are very aware of these watersheds and where they're located. But so for Middle Fork, this is 64. Here we have the intersection with the Waterson out to the Snyder. We sampled here where there's this red dot with the kind of the black ring around it. And that is at near Big Rock at Cherokee Park, where there were a lot of folks, especially in the creek there this summer, particularly because the pools were closed. And you can see as far as the dominant land use is single family residences. There's also areas along the roads, the rights of way in red, and then 13% of the watershed consists of parks and open spaces. And really you can see in the green there that our site was near, you know, mostly the park spaces. The South Fork and the Middle Fork are about the same size relatively, and fairly similar in their land use percentages. One difference you'll note is that there is half of the percent in area essentially for parks and open space in South Fork, and twice as much industry, but it's a very small percent difference. The site that we sampled is along Newburgh Road. basically by Bellarmine. And I used to adjunct there. I know that students get in the stream there. There are sample sites there for environmental science classes. And it's at the bottom of Joe Creason Park for folks that are familiar with those parks. And you can see I-65 essentially borders the watershed to the west. And then we have the Watershed kind of cutting through the center of the watershed. So this is just some fun pictures of us sampling in November and December. It was pretty cold. I'm there with the orange buff with a 95 mask on underneath, and that's my colleague Cullen Hunter sampling. We wore gloves, we wore masks, as if, you know, to protect ourselves from each other and from any kind of potential impact from the creek. We also collected data from the Hydro Lab. I only present a few variables tonight and in the webinar before, just kind of for a time saving.
You're still on this?
But the Hydro Lab does collect dissolved oxygen, percent saturation, turbidity, specific conductivity, and salinity, and also blue greens, but we weren't necessarily concerned with that at that time. This is the Newburgh Roadside, so you can see it's right by the fairly large CSO. I think it's 108, right along Newburgh Road. This side is, the water is deeper here. We would have needed waders to go out to the middle of the creek. It was also more stagnant standing water than what we would have at Big Rock. Big Rock was shallow, pretty swift moving water. You could wade all the way across the stream easily and just kind of like a pair of muck boots. And it was a little bit of a challenge to get down to the creek and sample this side because it's a pretty big hill going up to Newburgh Road. And at each site we took 5 grab samples for SARS-CoV-2 and 500 milliliter Nalgene bottles, put them on ice, and we sent them to, we dropped them off at Eurofins. Eurofins is actually a large national lab, but they have a local, basically molecular biology lab off Blankenbaker. And so they analyzed for the presence of another virus I'll talk about, and SARS-CoV-2 presence. And then we took 5 replicates from the Hydro Lab for the water quality data at each site. And then we also did some nutrient strip testing. The accuracy, the resolution on those strips wasn't very high. So that was just kind of to try to see what the levels were. We are more interested in what those nutrient levels might be though. So we were trying to catch rain events, which was a little bit of a logistical challenge in a couple of ways. One is because Eurofins, the lab, could basically only take our samples Monday through Thursday. So it seemed like it always rained on the weekend or something like that. And then you know how flashy our streams are as well. They rise and recede quickly, but we were trying to catch anytime there was an overflow advisory during this period from MSD. So we would check MSD's website to see if there was an overflow advisory. Now that is based on rainfall. We are starting to get the data from MSD about how much volume of untreated material was released on these dates. So we're looking at those data right now. So it was kind of a little bit of a black box in a way. We knew that there were releases occurring, but we didn't know exactly how much. So we have 3 sample dates here. And so I pulled the hydrographs from USGS, and you're all familiar with these, looking at, you know, cubic feet per second in the stream. And you can see that on almost all of our dates, we're on kind of the rising limb of the discharge graph. So as this limb is increasing, that's when we tend to sample. We are curious about looking at these sampling each day potentially, or maybe every 12 hours potentially after these rainfall events, to see how the presence may change. And so this is, sorry, I can't see my y-axis there. So you can see that when we look at the discharge levels, they're fairly low on the November dates. I did check back into the spring for the December date, and so the December date does reflect a spring discharge level, because again, we don't have the whole annual hydrograph here. And the volumes are pretty similar in the streams, or the discharge levels were pretty similar in both streams, and that's kind of to be expected because the watersheds are about the same size, although the South Fork does have increased a little bit higher discharge than the Middle Fork, and that again may be due to the land management in the watershed, especially how the parks are managed. If those of you that are familiar with Joe Creason Park, it's a sledding hill, so it's just a straight hill into the stream. There's at least upstream in that area, there's not a large riparian buffer system. There is downstream on the left bank, and then also you have Bellarmine University adjacent to that fork. And this is just to show a temperature range that we sampled within. Temperature is known to affect the stability of SARS-CoV-2 in the environment. They tend to persist longer in the environment with cooler temperatures, actually. And we did tend to see, a similar range between the two streams. For our turbidity, so if we look at the Middle Fork, again, that's Big Rock. South Fork is Newburgh Road. Middle Fork's in blue, and the South Fork is in orange. Typically, South Fork had higher turbidity levels. These are error bars, and they do show a significant difference, at least on November 12th and November 24th in turbidity between the two forks. We're interested in turbidity for a couple of reasons. The main reason being that viruses tend to adhere to particles, and turbidity in a way is a representative of a potential sediment load, but as you all know, there's more to turbidity than just the mineral, the non-living turbidity. Okay, so sorry, I keep moving y'all around and I can't see my graphs. Okay, so here we have the concentration of SARS-CoV-2. These are copies of RNA. These are copies per milliliter. And again, the Middle Fork's in blue, Big Rock. The South Fork, Newburgh, is in orange. Now, despite the same number of samples on each sample date, some of the samples were undetectable, or the SARS-CoV-2 is undetectable in some of the samples. So if it was below the detectable limit, it's not graphed here. So that's why you see, more dots for the South Fork than you do the Middle Fork. So we typically did detect SARS-CoV-2 in almost all the samples from South Fork. You see the very high value here of greater than 140 in South Fork. That was one sample that we found out of all 15 for that stream. And that is similar to what had been sampled in some of the wastewater sample sites for Envirom. So it is high, and just to kind of understand what these numbers mean. And so, but typically the concentration was less than 10, typically about below 5. Now the pepper mild mottle virus, PMMOV, this is a relatively recent indicator that scientists have been using to look at the presence of human feces and wastewater. So PMMOV, it affects peppers and tomatoes, basically nightshade plants. And we are a vector for this virus. We eat those plants and then we shed the virus in our feces. So we detected these PMMOV at all sites on all dates, and we're trying to tease apart, you know, why there were these differences potentially between the different dates and the different sites. And we're hoping that looking at discharge from the stream, you know, doing a little bit more advanced stats, because these are all really preliminary data here, but then also trying to understand what the sewer or the CSO inputs were from MSD. And I think we just got those data yesterday. It takes them a while to compile those reports. So overall, you know, the concentration of SARS-CoV-2 in surface water is much, much lower than what folks are finding, especially the Envirome Institute and other groups around the country that are sampling wastewater in cities. And that's to be expected because surface water is diluted by stormwater runoff, and then just the stream by itself is just not as concentrated. We did have that very high value in South Fork. I did take out the sediment sampling, and now it's in a summary, but we also did a sediment sample. It was only 2 samples though, and we didn't detect it in the sediment, but also that was 9 days after the last rain event, after the last overflow advisory. So we think possibly that the virus just wasn't stable at that time. There have been some studies. One was a marine study that says that typically after 8 days, the virus isn't stable. So we think that's why we didn't potentially capture SARS-CoV-2 in a sediment sample. We also saw, it was kind of surprising, we saw a lower concentration on our highest discharge date, which was the New Year's Eve. That's what we were doing on New Year's Eve, was sampling for COVID in Beargrass Creek. But that was surprising to us. But when we sampled that day, it had just stopped raining. So we think that potentially the rain running off of the watershed, that surface runoff, might have potentially been diluting any CSO input or any viruses that might have already been viral particles that might have been present in the stream before then. We saw PMMOV every time. And really, we're trying to understand this relationship, and more data always helps. Of course, these are very, very expensive samples. Each sample costs $250. So, you know, every time we went out, you know, it was like a $5,000 day. So along with the cost of the hydrolab and personnel and whatnot. I know that, well, I'm going to go on to the research questions. I would say that Ward, Charlotte from KWA, Colin and I are meeting, I think tomorrow, because there's a little bit of a budget to do another round of sampling, and we're going to kind of get together, put our heads together, and see how we want to do that in the most effective way based on these preliminary results. And yeah, we're just really interested in how water quality and the sediment type might affect the presence and stability of SARS-CoV-2. Sediment type is important because RNA is typically negative, and our silt particles tend to be more positively charged, so they may be attracted. If we have streams that are high in clay, clay is typically negatively charged, and so it may actually be repelling the virus. So sediment type is, you know, soil particle type is very interesting to investigate. We're also interested in how land management might be affecting the presence of SARS-CoV-2, and of course that surface runoff that leads to the CSO overflow. We're also concerned about areas that have failed septic systems or straight pops. We know that those exist around our Commonwealth. and that there might be other recreational areas in, you know, in Metro or Jefferson County that we're not as familiar with. People tend to know Big Rock fairly well because it's in a highly visible, often visited park, Cherokee Park. So there may be other hotspots for recreation that we're not aware of. And then again, we're starting to get the data from MSD about that CSO overflow volume. But of course, always like to try to wrap up with some recommendations and how to stay safe, especially with really this novel, you know, findings that, you know, that are a result of this study. And it basically boils down to, we know E. coli is there after a rain event, and so we should always avoid a stream when there is an overflow advisory. Not even because of SARS-CoV-2, but because we know that E. coli is there. And so folks should always check the MSD website to see if there is an overflow. I do it for my own personal uses, for classes where my class is going to go sample a portion of Beargrass Creek after spring break, and I'll be checking the MSD website. And of course, folks should always wash their hands and try to, you know, avoid splashing. I think the major concern is even with E. coli, well, different from E. coli, but ingesting water that has been splashed into the mouth, that is certainly a concern with E. coli, or water that could be splashed up into the nose might be more of an issue with SARS-CoV-2. And of course, we can all do have individual actions to try to reduce wastewater and stormwater runoff. So things like, you know, not taking a shower or running the washing machine during a rain event, those can kind of help reduce the load on that sewer system and MSD, because, you know, we are in a period of extreme weather events already, and that's putting another stressor on the system. And just a few folks to thank, really, organizations. Kentucky Waterways Alliance was able to obtain a grant from Newman's Own Foundation, so they footed the bill for this. There's no way we could have, you know, conducted this work without them. And we also partnered with MSD. They've been great about sharing their data and working with us, and then the Owsley Brown family and the Christina Lee Brown Environment Institute. So I'm gonna quit sharing so I can see the chat, and I guess we can handle any questions.
Thanks, Tamara. So a question from the chat was just the possibility of, I think, Salt River Watershed Watch samplers helping in terms of collecting.
Yeah, and so that's something we're kind of interested. We're also interested in doing E. coli and potentially SARS-CoV-2 sampling at the same time, because a lot of times in like microbiological studies, you don't necessarily always sample for your target species, but there's a corollary species that you can sample for that might be cheaper. So we are interested to see if there's a relationship between E. coli and SARS-CoV-2. We would want also to protect the samplers too. And so we, especially if there's a compromised immune system or pre-existing health condition. So if folks were interested in sampling, you know, we would want you to be protected, wear a mask and gloves, and safety goggles too. Just, and I mean, you know, this could be really, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Not scandalous, but, you know, we just want to be cautious, because this could be taken as, oh my goodness, you know, COVID's in Beargrass Creek. Yes, it's there. And we don't know how it doesn't seem to be stable for very long in that environment, but still we want to proceed with caution. We're not out to scare anybody, and we want to make sure that people feel comfortable sampling their stream.
Any other questions for Tamara?
Tamara, it was fascinating. My question is that, is this going to be persistent down the road, or as the virus leaves the human population, is it going to be residing in our streams or in other vectors, or is it closely tied to the infection rate in our community?
It's a great question, and it really seems like it's tied to the infection rate, unlike E. coli, because E. coli is always with us, no matter what. And I would say that we won't necessarily know that it's there unless we study it. But with that co-immunity project, in that project, they're not only sampling wastewater, but they're also sampling the rate of infection in people. So is it higher in wastewater because more people are sick, or because of greater shedding in other people? So they're looking at that correlation between, people that are actually infected, how much is in the wastewater, and that does seem to be correlated and going down. And hopefully it will decrease, especially with vaccinations. And there is a difference in different parts of town. And they're kind of looking at some of those demographic kind of questions. Why might that be? But I think that it'll go away. But E. coli will always be with us.
It'll go away by April 15th, maybe, or last year. Now, here, just one more question, and that is, how dangerous is it for what's your advice just for people who are sampling in Salt River Watershed Watch systems? We're having a session on April 10th, one on April 24th. And so is it just careful, wearing your mask and wearing gloves and some sort of eye protection? And your advice is go for it?
Don't quote me on that. But seriously, I didn't want to find it. That was the hope, to not find it, because that's easy, right? And so this is the difficulty of, okay, it's there. What does it mean? And of course, I'm an ecologist, I'm not an epidemiologist. But I would say I didn't get sick, but I don't know if that's, that's not very scientific either. But I do think that, again, watching the rain events, even if there is a date scheduled, trying to be flexible. And I do think that it is good to have gloves and a mask. And of course, I hate that we're producing all this PPE waste, but we just have to be careful. And if folks have been vaccinated, that is a little bit more, you can feel a little bit more confident that way. But
and is this going to put more pressure on MSD and the Kentucky Division of Water to ensure that there's fewer overflows as viruses have a chance of being communicated through this? Because right now I know MSD is spending a lot of money eliminating the CSOs, but it's not eliminating all of them, just because that, it was just too expensive to eliminate all of them. So should that decision be reconsidered, and we want to eliminate all of them instead of the 98% or 95% that because we aren't going to do extreme flows because it's just too expensive. So is this something that the Division of Water needs to up its standards and say no CSO events?
I mean, I'd love to see them all go, and I know MSD's under a lot of pressure. And they've been so great to work with. I mean, honestly, it could be very easy for them to not partner. And so they've been completely transparent about everything. It may be that there has to, if it really does come down to money, which sometimes I don't always believe that, not just the MSD, but everything, but to prioritize based on recreational use of the waters. In an equitable way too. And I'd say and as far as the presence in the river or a larger body of water or downstream, we have no idea. We just don't know.
Perry, is there any discussion in the Division of Water about making these pieces more stringent? Because we have COVID-19 now. Next year, I heard this wonderful thing on Saturday Night Live of selling COVID-20. And it was just a great commercial on what COVID-20, and we should be ready for the next infection coming along. So is the Division of Water thinking about upping those standards?
I don't know, David. Keep in mind that our section, the non-point source section, has not been responsible for monitoring or regulating CSOs. So I'm not involved in those conversations.
That comment
Out there, Perry, but it's true. This would be a point source. Yeah. Sorry, Warden.
I'll just mention that we've talked a lot about what this risk is, and one reason we got this grant is I had heard people expressing some concern about sampling in the waterway. So I said, let's find out. You know, the results are not viruses necessarily. They're genetic signatures of the virus, and somebody with a PhD like Tamara can explain more. But we don't know for sure that's intact virus that we're detecting, and we don't know for sure that it's infectious, capable of an infection. So there's a lot unknown. Then what I've been reading about the risks from water, a lot of it's around wastewater treatment plant operators, because they are definitely exposed to wastewater which has COVID-19 in it. Virome Institute has a lot of results. And EPA is saying there's a lot of other risk to wastewater, and take the same risk, the same precautions. The virus doesn't persist that long in water from the results we have. There's so many unknowns, but the research that I've seen shows that it doesn't persist that long. So I don't want to make it sound like it's not a problem, but it's not. I think the bigger issue and what we're focusing on is there's sewage in our streams, and there's plenty of other reasons to be concerned. And E. coli is just an indicator organism of all sorts of things, including COVID-19. So take all the precautions that you should have been taking anyway, and maybe a little bit more. But you know, we don't know of any increased risk, especially from water.
You know, I just wonder because there has been a little pushback about MSD rates and the expense of doing this necessary work that has to be done because we let our infrastructure get way behind, and there's so much maintenance that needs to happen, and there's funds available, and there's overarching concern about COVID. And if there is a way of linking the two, we don't want to create an issue, but maybe that would really solve some of MSD's customer relation problems, because we're cleaning up the streams and we don't want to have this, you know. So, you know, I'm just trying to think about how it, because it's wonderful that our community has started this process of redoing our streams and reducing the CSO outfalls. Just imagine if we didn't. And so it's just another kudos for MSD to take care of this and being proactive. So.
David, I just wanted to jump in really quick. I caught part of your question. I'm having a little bit of connectivity issues, but I think, you know, part of that is just clarifying that we do have a combined sewer system in Louisville, and so there's no eliminating combined sewer overflows when you have a combined sewer system. So, you know, we are seeing more intense, more frequent storm events, and, you know, there's always going to be that larger natural system that is going to cause overflows at some threshold. And so the waterway protection tunnel that we talked about and the basin projects are all designed to be able to reduce the volume of overflow that is released into the environment. Thanks.
Good presentation.
Any other questions or comments?
I might just put a plug in for nature-based solutions and green infrastructure to reduce the amount of stormwater getting to the the stormwater system.
And that's something all of us can do on our own property. MSD is in charge of CSOs, and they've got the permits, and they're going to have to build the tunnels. We can't build tunnels, but all of us can disconnect our downspouts from a pipe that goes straight to the storm sewer, put it in your, keep that water on your property. It's your water.
Great input.
And honestly, I am very interested in the differences we did see between the two streams with the SARS-CoV-2 concentration. And I really think that Olmsted Parks and Cherokee Park with the forest buffering system that they have is potentially what is minimizing that concentration in the stream. But again, we're going to check at what the discharges were from the CSOs during those dates too.
All right, well, great presentation. Hopefully we can get an update as things move forward, and if there are opportunities for volunteers here to help, then we'll work towards that. If nobody else has any other comments or questions, I'll just say thank you so much again. Thank you to our presenters and to everybody who's stuck it out. We're a little over time, but I think that's also what usually happens. So
Becca, I do have one more question, and we'll stay here all night with it. But Mr. Greg Coons, who I don't think is online anymore, had a wonderful police tape that was called Riparian Restoration Area, and he put it up there. It was one of the slides that you showed on your screen. I've never seen the Riparian Restoration Area tape. Is that available for sale? Do you know where he got it from?
Oh, I have no idea, but I noticed that too, and I had a mental note to figure that out.
Yeah, I would say go to forestry suppliers. They have that kind of stuff.
And it's called Riparian Restoration
I bet they do. Yeah. And wetland restoration, and yeah. It'd be cool to have. I can see that all around your property, David.
Well, we'll get with Greg and see if he has an idea. But okay, well, you can find it on Walmart. Flagging tape, Riparian Management Zone. I think that's what it said.
Help promote the workshops coming up, the 2 workshops. We'd love to have more volunteers. I think it'd be great. Barn 8 and Blue Moon Canoe and Kayak are both great sponsors, and they're actually going to have a nice Blue Moon Canoe and Kayak is going to be willing to donate canoes for volunteers if they want to get involved with that. So they are a good group to work with. 2 sites, one down on the Salt River and one on Floyd's Fork. Beautiful.
Dave, I had a question for you.
Sure, Mr. Moser. Mr. Moser, if you haven't got enough kudos, some of those photos in the Beargrass Creek book are just beautiful. And if people here don't know that, Mr. Moser was the photographer for several of them.
Well, I thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm hoping to get you some more. My question was that y'all did birds this time. What about the other animals and stuff that are in the creeks and rivers and stuff? You going to be interested in those?
Well, we did start a whole thing on trees of Beargrass Creek, and I think something like that would be fascinating as well. You know, it makes sense to do macroinvertebrates of Beargrass Creek, and you know, I think Miss Page has, you know, I think she only has 15 years teaching in, so she has another 12 left. So she loves suggestions, you know. We'll just get birds and then out the pods, and who knows.
You see a lot of stuff when you're canoeing on the river and kayaking and stuff. So
you do.
When are you going to do another cleanup?
Ward, do you know when the next Beargrass Creek or the next KWA cleanup is?
We don't have one scheduled, but we're going to be doing a lot. Cleanups are really popular, so I would put a plug in for the Beargrass Creek Alliance. And also our site. We have some planned for the Kentucky River and the Red River this year. You know, it's tough, but we try to do small groups and keep people apart, and it's hard to serve donuts. But other than that, we can still do cleanups.
Yeah, I was noticed at the mouth of the Beargrass Creek right at the Ohio River. Man, it's got a lot of stuff around it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's
It's
a tough
growing.
site too, because you can't wade, you know, in it. You know, we like for people who are more experienced and with boats to do that. We really need some equipment. We've been talking about the trash islands and doing something about them.
There's some big items there, like big drums and stuff I noticed yesterday down there. So.
That's a shame.
It's a nice thing to think about that Louisville has trash islands just like the Pacific Ocean. No,
Yeah.
they're not quite as large as out in the middle of the ocean, but they're there. Trash islands.
If
Thank
you're
you.
interested in that Riparian management tape, it's available at Walmart, $64 for a roll.
I already put the link in the chat.
Becca's on it, but I would say go to forestry suppliers, not Walmart.
Yeah,
And is
yeah.
that for 10 feet of tape? $64 for 10 feet of tape?
That's what I'm selling it to you for, David.
Jesus, that's
Logging
quite a
supply.
markup. High overhead down there.
I wouldn't be a good at my job if I didn't get various options on things. So here's another one. Logging supply.
I'm gonna put in forestry suppliers. I've been Googling too.
There you go.
$3.75 a roll.
We'll get some.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you all so much. Obviously, we could go on and on and on, which is great.
We had I think a high of 57 at one time. So
Oh, wow.
I think it was a good conference, and I think we have some energetic people going forward. It's wonderful. Maybe
Yeah,
we'll
thank
even
you all.
get on a lake.
Thanks for the invite.
All right.
All right.
Everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Enjoy-
Good night.
and no cleanup as somebody mentioned. Thank you.
Take care. I'm ending the meeting.